All right. Well, good morning and welcome. Welcome to the Philippines. Welcome to Manila. Welcome to ADB. Welcome to this session. Today, we are going to discuss financing renewable projects in Asia and beyond. We have an esteemed panel of speakers. We also have a keynote speaker and the person who will be doing our welcoming remarks. We will dive into the instruments available to investors for innovative financing in Asia and beyond, and hopefully you will find it useful. Without further ado, I would like to invite Enrico Pinali, Regional Head, Private Sector Development, Asian Development Bank. Thank you.
Okay. Also, good morning from my side. I'm glad to welcome you in Manila. I hope you look out the window this morning. There was a nice rain shower, one of the typical ones that we get in Manila. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to be here today. Also to welcome you, all the esteemed panelists, colleagues, and of course our moderator Sania. Again, as you said, I'm Enrico Pinali. I'm the regional head for private sector development of the Asian Development Bank. In my current role, I actually cover 10 countries. Those are 5 Central Asian, 3 of the Caucasus region, as well as Pakistan and Afghanistan. And I cover that from a regional management perspective, meaning that I have a luxury to be in a product neutral position and work with all the ADB teams in providing private sector development solutions, whether they are on the advisory side or in the financing lending side. The private sector has a critical role to play in addressing climate change by investing in low carbon technologies, developing new technologies, and building climate resilience in its investments and operations. So from a climate perspective, ADB private sector operations are here to invest and mobilize capital to support the decarbonization and climate resilience development of the private sector in our developing member countries. So to reach net zero, it's imperative to massively scale up the deployment of known solutions and rapidly accelerate innovation for emerging solutions that will be critical to foster this decarbonization. As ADB, we aim to invest in climate finance team to support mitigation, adaptation, and climate finance value chains. So our focus for mitigation are energy, transport, and agriculture, and we see the potential to do more in industrial decarbonization, especially in what are known as the hard to abate sectors. And if you have seen in the program of ASEF, there is a series of sessions dedicated to that team. But also we're looking at green buildings, we're looking at energy efficiency. So there are several areas in mitigation. On adaptation, the focus is on agribusiness, water, nature-based solutions, and healthcare. And in climate value chain opportunities, this is an area where traditionally ADB has not been very active, but we see a lot of opportunities going forward, especially manufacturing, agribusiness, and bioeconomy, as well as mining and minerals processing. So in terms of results, in 2023, our private sector provided over $1 billion of climate finance commitment to 30 projects, alongside a co-financing of about 2.3 billion. We also deploy about 60 million in blended finance to support particularly innovative financing structures and technology. So this brought our cumulative climate finance commitments, including trade and supply chain and ADB Ventures investment, to around 8.9 billion since 2019. Now, given that I cover a specific region, let me give you a couple of case studies from there good examples of the type of work that we do and the evolution of our work. So in Uzbekistan, which was my place of residence for the last 4 years, ADB has been advising the government on launching 1 gigawatt solar program through public-private partnerships. The work commenced in 2019 and involved advisory work with the government of Uzbekistan on structuring the program and running successful renewable energy tenders. ADB also, and you will hear more today from our colleague Alex here, provided partial credit guarantee to enhance the creditworthiness of the off-taker, which is the national electric grid of Uzbekistan. So last year, ADB supported the first project developed through this initiative, and so far up to date, as far as I know, the largest solar park in Central Asia, 457 megawatt Shirabat solar project. So again, there we took a portfolio approach, and in addition to the Shirabat project, we also co-financing other solar projects like the Jizak and Samarkand ones. So together, this project will result in additional solar capacity of almost 500 megawatts. But it's not only solar. In addition to this program, we also finance, I think 3 now, 500 megawatts wind project in Bash, Zhenzili, and Zarafshan. So again, to give you another example and a different type of technologies in the same regional competence, in Georgia, we have invested of a number of landmark transactions, especially landmark financial instruments for climate finance. I'm talking about, I guess, renewable energy to a Georgian green bond project, sustainable transport to another project called Tegeta Green Vehicle Bond Project. And also, we actually went to work as well on a green equality bond project with a partner institution called Crystal. So again, we do the renewables, we do other green type of engagements, which focus on other type of aspects with, from the EVs to even the green and gender angle. But in general, I can reiterate that it's not enough. We have a known gap of global financing, climate finance investment needs to 2030. That is in order of 4 to 8 times. That's a huge gap. So strong partnership are needed to mobilize financing. And in this session, you will look at the number of instruments, financial instruments especially, available to the energy sector stakeholders. So I really look forward to this expert discussion, but also in particular, I would like to myself understand where is the next frontier of renewable financing and how can we all together get there? So I'll stop here and I'll welcome once again to this session to Manila and to our green ADB building. So thank you again, and I will get the word back to Xenia and over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. As you can see, we decided not to keep our panelists here so that you could see the presentations, and it's also really hot here. So if you could see us going like this, be mindful that it's not as well air conditioned as where you sit. So I would also like to invite our keynote presentation speaker, Mr. Moro Shino, President and CEO of Marubeni Asian Power Singapore. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moro Shino from Marubeni Asian Power Singapore. Ohayo gozaimasu. I'm a regional CEO to cover the whole Asia, APAC region for all the power investment related from Marubeni Corporation. In March 2021, Marubeni announced a long-term vision on the climate change to strive toward a net zero greenhouse gas emission from the group by 2050. To make this vision effective, Marubeni has formulated the action plan, which it is in the process of implementation as we head toward 2030. These actions include, among others, reducing CO2 emission by Marubeni and its subsidiaries, which is equivalent to the 500,000 tons of CO2, and reducing by one-fifth of CO2 emission emitted by associated Marubeni Group, which is equivalent to 7.2 million ton CO2. And then having the net power generation capacity of our coal-fired power plant generation businesses. The map of this slide shows our generation portfolio in Asia as of April this year. Our global and Asia generation portfolio has 36 gigawatt gross and 11.4 gigawatt net. And in Asia, 14.5 gigawatt gross and 5.7 gigawatt net, respectively. On this slide, a star of yellow, pink, and yellow, pink, and purple represent the Marubeni's coal, gas, and LNG project in Asia. And while stars in red, sky blue, and brown represent our solar, hydro, geothermal projects. You can see our portfolio Asia currently comprises of more thermal projects. So in this sense, our asset is a bit contaminated, I should say. In line with that action plan we just explained, our goal is to shift our generation portfolio to more renewables. Marubeni has a rich track record of renewable projects. Among others, I'd like to introduce some other renewable assets we own in Asia. First one is San Roque, which I built in Philippines. It's in operation since 2003. And on the right, you can see the picture of floating solar power plant in Taiwan. We call it the Chenya Energy. This is operating more than 200 megawatt floating solar generation asset in Taiwan. This is one of the largest in the world. And then we have completed this one. We have completed the first commercial base offshore wind in Akita, Japan. It's a 2020 in operation. At the bottom, we have a geothermal power plant in Indonesia, which started commercial operation in 2021. In addition, before we completed geothermal power plant in Philippines, named Mindanao 1 and 2. That was started operation in 1997, then transferred to EDC on 2009. So we have a rich renewable experience in the region, I guess. Then next, I'd like to introduce some of the recent renewable project development in the region, especially two solar projects in Bangladesh, which is under discussion with ADB. First one is a 100 megawatt solar project in Bangladesh, which names Feni 100 megawatt solar project. We tied up with a state-owned entity, EGCB, that's an electricity generation company of Bangladesh, as a 50-50 basis. We are looking for the commercial lenders as of now. We received a letter of intent in November last year as a mean of award, and we are in the process of a PPA negotiation and also talking about the bankability. The second project is a Mongra solar project. This is also 100 megawatt Then we received the same kind of notice of award from Sheikh Hasina in Japan, and it's also under PPA negotiation. We are looking for the commercial lender to support. And in addition to the Bangladesh project, Marubeni is also developing solar and offshore wind and the BESS project in Taiwan, Philippines, and Vietnam, and Thailand. So if you are interested, please approach us. And we are happy to be in a discussion. And then in other aspect of our business in power is power supply and retail business. The company is stated that it's a Marubeni entity that conduct the power supply and retail businesses. As you can see, we conduct these businesses globally, including Asia. I'd like to touch a little bit on Team Energy in the Philippines. Team Energy is a power company which owns some thermal power plants, in total 2,300 megawatt. As shown on this slide, Team Energy conducts the retail power supply business to the commercial and the industrial customers, as well as offering a renewable energy certificate to our customers. As a value-added solution to the customer, we also provide the rooftop solar services. And as a retail electricity supplier, Team Energy can also do function of the off-taker of power and sell electricity in a wholesale market in Philippines. That's we do. And in Singapore, Marubeni owns Senoko Energy. It's 2,700 megawatt. It's gas-fired, but we do generation, distribution, the retail, everything in Singapore. That's 1/3 of the total capacity of Singapore. Even my house in Singapore, I'm buying power from Senoko Energy. It's a bit expensive though. Senoko can be the importer of renewable energy to Singapore from Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia. We are in discussion with these countries. Oh, sorry, it's too early. But Marubeni has developed many power generation projects as a professional developer. We strongly believe that our expertise and experience can contribute to the introducing more renewable projects in the region. But we have so much project to implement. But we have even Marubeni is a big company, I should say big company, but we have some constraints on equity and also finances. It's very key for us to grow. So we are looking at even equity side, we are looking at issuing a green bond or establish a green fund. They invite other participants as like a financial investor basis. And then also talking about the listing a company, then get more cash to invest in the future project. So on this point, I believe that there are significant area which professional developer and the professional financiers can increase the collaboration and the synergy to better contribute to clean energy transition. Our belief is a simple developing project in a conventional way has its limitation. So we keen to explore a potential solution to overcome these cash shortages and realize the benefit of all the parties involved. In this way, we look forward to developing and enhance our relationship with the financiers. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Shine. That also made me think about our electricity bills in Manila, especially during this season. Next, I will invite our first panelist. We will have 5 total panelists, but I will not be inviting them to the stage, as I said, for the reason that it's really hard and you will not be able to see it. So I would like to invite Juliet Lusnig, and Juliet is a senior investment officer at European Investment Bank, but also our very own ADB DNA exported to Europe. Juliet spent a number of years working for ADB, so we very much welcome her back. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Xenia, and the organizers to allow me to present more details on the work of the EIB now, indeed. I guess I truly represent the and beyond part of the title of this session. And indeed, I spent 10 years in this building, so I do know my way around. So the European Investment Bank is the bank of the European Union. As some of you may know, we have very early on positioned ourselves to be the climate bank, and we were the first bank to completely stop lending to fossil fuels from the end of 21 onwards. At the announcement of the EIB Climate Bank Roadmap, ambitious goals were set that more than 50% of our annual financing should go to climate action and environmental sustainability, and that all of our projects would need to be aligned with the principles and goals of the Paris Agreement. The EIB is one of the largest multilateral lenders in the world. Given our size, we raise funds at favorable terms and at international capital markets, and we aim to pass that on to our clients. Since its inception in 1958, we've invested more than 1.5 trillion euros in over 14,000 projects in 160 countries. We are headquartered in Luxembourg, but we have around 60 offices around the world, of which a few are located here in Asia. However, our local presence on the ground outside of the EU is fairly limited, and that's why we strongly believe in the cooperation with local and regional players like the ADB. The slides provide a specification of our activities of lending in the energy sector last year. We invested more than 21 billion euros in energy-related projects, of which 9.14 billion were for the growth of the renewable energy sector. We now zoom into the EIB activities outside of the EU, which falls under one dedicated department within the bank, which is called EIB Global. Most people will probably know us as the Bank of the European Union, but are less familiar with our activities outside of the EU. However, at EIB Global, we count for roughly 10% of the EIB financing each year, which added up to 9.5 billion euros last year. These amounts represent investment both in the private and the public sector as well. This is not a map to specify in which countries we are active. We have somewhat different mandates for the different regions, but we can invest both in the public and private sector in most of these countries. As mentioned, the EIB is the Bank of the European Union, and as such, we finance the EU policies. These are specific plans for cooperation with each country or region, but as an overall guiding policy, there is, amongst others, the EU Global Gateway Agenda. This aims to boost smart, clean, and secure links in the digital, transport, energy, and climate-relevant sectors, and strengthens education, research, and health networks. In short, this leads us to focus our investments in priority areas of green energy supply, sustainable transport networks, digital connectivity, sustainable supply chains for critical raw materials, and human development. As said, our investments both include private and public investments. I work in the project finance team for the outside of EU business, so I will focus mainly on the private sector activities. Within that, we can typically provide financing to banks to finance SMEs, portfolio guarantee, or dedicated credit lines, for example. But we also invest in microfinance institutions and private equity funds. On the direct lending side, we provide balance sheet financing through corporate loans, as well as project-based project finance loans. The advantages of working with the EIB are very similar to other MDBs in terms of providing affordable pricing with long maturities. We are a long-term partner, and due to the thorough due diligence process, our investments have a signaling effect to the market. Last but not least, we can provide blending of the EU grants, concessional funds, or technical assistance facilities in some regions. All of the above leads to a selected focus within my team on renewable energy projects, water projects such as desalination, sustainable transport, and digitalization projects. The following slides will provide some concrete examples of projects which my team has focused on for project finance outside of the EU. This shows investments in renewable subsectors across the globe and the different roles that we can play even within one project. For example, a wind project in Kenya a couple of years ago where we financed 4 different products: an ECA covered tranche, a direct loan, a guarantee to local banks, as well as a blended finance facility in the form of a preferred equity. In other loans, like the Uzbekistan project already mentioned by Enrique, and which Alexander will discuss more on, we simply provided a senior loan while working with the ADB. The difference, for example, between Uzbekistan and Senegal, which you will see, is not just a project size, but it's also the tariff that you can see in Asia versus Africa. This shows that there's still a very long way to go in de-risking projects in less developed markets in Africa like Senegal. This slide provides a wider overview, which our team is doing in different parts of the world, with a very strong focus on renewable energy. We will now move to examples inside of the EU, as I was asked to present some of our more innovative products and projects that we can finance. Especially inside of the EU, we've always had dedicated mandates from the European Commission to provide financing for innovation. Until 2020, one of those mandates was actually called the Innov Fund, which was later taken over by the InvestEU facility, which comprises of a direct investment fund, an advisory hub, and a so-called EU portal. This portal brings together investors and project promoters on a single EU-wide database to promote investment opportunities available within the EU, Norway, and Iceland. This slide shows some of the innovative projects which the EIB has financed under the InvestEU mandate lately. It's actually a wide range of projects which we can undertake, from large investments in EV battery gigafactories to much smaller scale investments in innovative demonstration plants to produce eco-friendly battery materials. We also invest in R&D projects, for example, for the hydrogen mobility. And then we have another mega project, which is the H2 Green Steel, located in Sweden. This is an integrated primary steel producer, which is fully energized by green hydrogen. Sweden is blessed with a very green grid already due to abundance of hydropower, but also nuclear and wind power. Combined with the availability of high quality ore in Sweden, this makes that such an innovative project in a hard-to-abate sector can even be financially viable in one of the highest income countries in the world. And then moving back to one of the earlier innovation facilities which EIB had at its disposal, this is a very interesting example of floating wind, where the EIB financed already back in 2015 the first floating wind farm in the world. Building up experience in exciting projects like this inside the EU, this enables the EIB to leverage that expertise in financing much needed innovation energy transition projects outside of the EU as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Juliet. We are yet to see a number of hydrogen projects in Asia, so this is super exciting. This session would not be complete if we did not tell you more about the instruments that ADB provides, and I would like to invite Alex Jett from Guarantee Syndication Unit to tell us a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we employed one of our instruments, our partial credit guarantee, in Uzbekistan in our Sherabad solar project. My colleague Sungduk yesterday, some of those had given a little bit of the background of the program. And for me, I'm going to delve deeper into the guarantee itself. So I'll just go very quickly. Uzbekistan had a heavy reliance on fossil fuels. And there was a call to shift to more renewables, lots of investment needs. However, the state-owned off-taker was a new entity, unbundled from Uzbekenergo, and was unknown to the market. So, one of the drivers was to, deploy renewable energy projects at scale. And they needed a way to do this in a way that would be intuitive for investors and reduce risks. So our advisory services had a mandate and helped structure the project. And through that, we were able to put in the elements that we needed in the PPA, as well as to embed credit enhancement. So this is the initial design of the project. But if you look here and you heard some of the other speakers, you will note that they describe this as a 457 megawatt project, not a 200 megawatt project. And the reason is that bidders were allowed, within the space of land allocated, to propose how much they would build out. And so they actually proposed to build out a lot more than was initially designed. So this also included additionally a transmission line, which they would build and then transfer to the state, as well as a substation. So not sort of the easiest for your project. This is the project site. You can see it's located in an area with high irradiation. However, it lacks some of the grid infrastructure. So in order to attract investors and get a competitive project for the tender, we employed our guaranteed letter of credit. So here I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what this instrument actually is. So a lot of times when we discuss credit enhancement, we're talking about enhancing a lender. And that means that, if you're lending to the project, you can buy cover and you can file a claim if something goes wrong. However, during a tender process, at that stage, that does not sort of affect the overall structure of the project. And one of the main risks is, of course, in many of our DMCs, is the off-taker. So this instrument is designed to basically credit enhance the public sector. And so what does it cover? It covers the risk of non-payment or delay. It's fast dispersing. It's not something you have to go to court to get. You can get the cash on demand. It reduces project risks, and it has a very high leverage. Okay, this 5 to 10% really depends on the tariff. Obviously, if we were talking about Juliet's project in Senegal, it would be a much larger amount. This is for developing markets, first in kind, and also for a commercially viable project. So how does it actually work? Well, for lenders, this certainty of cash flow makes the project attractive and results in a lower risk, lower interest rate loan. This lower risk, as well as ADB's rating, translates into a lower cost of capital for the bidder. For the SOE or the off-taker, they have a longer time to sort out cash problems because what we do is we wrap a letter of credit and they have about 12 months. So if the cash flows are like this, they have some time to sort those out. And then, of course, the main point is for government and consumers, where you get lower tariffs due to that competitive bidding and the lower WACC, and you have cost savings for consumers. It's the main real benefit. So this is the sort of actual structure of Sherabad. And here, we have the amounts here. So you can see, in this case, we wrapped a letter of credit from Natixis, a French bank, with an A- rating. This is obviously a better rating than the off-taker has. And ADB is AAA. And for this 9.1 million, this was to leverage a project that had a cost of 431 million. So there's a lot of leverage in using a little bit of government support or sovereign programming, and you can really get a much better, more competitive tender. So there are a number of agreements on here, and I will just go through them briefly. But the main point is basically just step number 1 and step number 2. You have a power purchase agreement, you have an obligation to pay. If they don't pay, you can draw down on this letter of credit. This covers the entire tariff. In this case, the tariff covered an energy charge as well as a charge for the transmission line. So it covers that entire bill. So if you're the investor, you're made whole. In essence, this prevents government from having to get penalty interest or any charges, and really provides a good value for them. Now, if there is a draw, they have to repay under the reimbursement agreement. And then government also has an opportunity to pay under government support agreement. And ADB's guarantee only comes in after about 12 months if you're not reimbursed. And then we have a counter guarantee with government. So, but the essence of this is that it provides liquidity on demand. So when one of these is structured, how do we ensure that this is done in the right way, and what is sort of best practice? Well, one of the main things we do is, we discuss it, first of all, with our DMCs. And this should come very early in the process before tendering starts. We try to clear our own concept. And then we give our guarantee terms with the RFP issuance in an ideal situation. And this gives a proper signal to bidders and encourages more competitive bidding. This can be done after bidding has occurred. But you have less of a price effect if you do it this way. So for Sherabad, ADB was appointed as transaction advisor in September 2019. We helped with the feasibility study and tender. We received 54 EOIs, 11 pre-qualified, and then 5 final bids. Masdar was declared the winner in 2021. And then finally, we reached financial close. Sort of post-COVID era, and we reached commercial close for the second project, which is Guzar. The results, which you've also seen, if you've seen Sungdocs, are quite remarkable. The bidding was quite competitive. And then you can also see in the capacity, which is the orange dot, that the highest, that Masdar and Jinko both proposed in the neighborhood of 500 megawatts. By the way, these are published publicly in Uzbekistan. So there's nothing, it says confidential, but there's nothing really that secret here. So the point is that if you, it demonstrates that if you, structure a deal well, you can have very competitive results. And this is a value add that ADB can give. And it also demonstrates that credit enhancement can be used on the public side, but also sort of benefit private parties. So for me, this is my last slide, but since I have about another minute, I'm just going to go into one other aspect of this as I'm looking at my timer. So not the mechanism, people will ask me about that later. But I think what's important is maybe this part right here, where we talk about when this is needed or why this is needed. So if there's a perception of a weak off-taker, or government contracting agency, if this is a newer project for the market. Also, if government is willing to do a sovereign undertaking for the project. This is not practical in all cases, and sometimes we have other structures, which I'm happy to talk about offline, where we use donor funds if this is not possible. It could also be worth if the government credit rating is a bit weaker. So in some of our DMCs that have had fiscal issues, this would be a good option. Also, of course, finally, this is for a project that is commercially viable. This is not a Band-Aid. It cannot be applied for a project that is not a good deal. So that's probably the most important one. And then formulating, this has to be in the context. This doesn't fix everything. The off-taker's payment risk is one thing. Enabling regulatory environment and addressing fundamental SOE off-taker risks are what need to be considered. And eventually, the idea is that the market is competitive enough where you don't need to use this. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was a fantastic presentation. For now, award-winning projects. Several awards have been won this year. we will continue with my colleague, Phil Patterson. We'll have two Phils today, so because we're in the Philippines, I keep joking, so if someone wants to make a wish, find both of them. So thank you, Phil. Please join us on stage. Phil is managing the leading private sector fund at ADB, and he'll tell you more about it. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm going to talk about co-financing and blended finance in an ADB context. I'm part of the guarantees and syndications team. Our job is to find money for projects in the region. It's often done by conventional banks, conventional syndications, but that's not enough. So we look at other channels to raise funding. And one of those is the co-financing, where we set up programs with donor agencies. I'm going to talk mainly about one particular fund, which is the one that I manage. I'll get the name right. I'll change the slide. The leading Asia Private Infrastructure Fund, or LEAP. It's $1.5 billion commitment from the government of Japan, provided via JICA, so the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA. It's been established for a long time, since 2016, but it's reached the end of its investment period recently. And out of that total fund commitment of 1.5, it's come close to deploying all of that money, approaching 1.2 at the moment at the end of its investment period. So it has been a very successful partnership of JICA/LEAP co-financing with ADB. And as it says there on the third bullet point, projects that are supported by LEAP/ADB have supported $14 billion of investment in the region over that 7-year period. Based on the success of LEAP 1, we set up a second fund. We used a lot of imagination and decided to call it LEAP 2. And that was established in December last year. That fund is up and running. To just take one step back, in aggregate, that's a $3 billion commitment from the government of Japan for infrastructure in the region, a very significant commitment. But the new fund is up and running. Fund transactions have been approved and are going through the works as we speak. Just to give you a sense quickly, and I'm not going to go through all of these projects, of the breadth and depth of LEAP's involvement in Asia. So again, more than 1 billion, the slide's a little bit old. And you look at the geographic spread of what we've been involved in, and just to cherry pick a few transactions there to show you the depth of involvement. It's not just renewable power, there's tourism and aviation in the Pacific during COVID for Fiji Airways, tertiary education in the Philippines, the company's also involved in Indonesia, remote broadband satellite in remote areas in the Pacific via Pacific. And up there on the top left, we supported a kidney dialysis program in a hospital in Uzbekistan. So the depth of the spectrum of what we can look at under LEAP is quite broad. Again, not just renewable power, although that remains the bedrock of this business. Just to step you through how the fund works. Again, it's $1.5 billion in aggregate. It was set up in December last year. It's set up into 3 different streams. The first two are what we call a parallel stream, which is where LEAP comes in alongside ADB. It's a co-financing fund on identical terms. It doesn't have to be the same amount, but beyond that, terms and conditions are identical. So the obvious question is, if the terms and conditions are identical, then what's the point? The benefit of the parallel program is you're accessing 2 different liquidity pools, so you've got access to more money, and ADB can deliver that money with a greater amount of certainty than it would be if it was going out to the bank market for that project. So proponents get more line of sight as to where the money's coming from quicker. There's an efficiency element there as well. You know, proponents are only negotiating term sheets and loan agreements with one party, one due diligence process, one credit committee, two pools of money. So it's a speed and efficiency argument that the parallel program works for. And again, most of what was done under LEAP 1 was under that parallel program. The non-parallel program is where we get into the realms of blended finance, concessional finance. And when you start talking about that, most developers just think, oh, it's cheaper money. Maybe. It's capped at 200 million. It's a subset of the overall LEAP fund. And again, it has the ability to offer terms and conditions as required to get the deal done. I think of non-parallel as the last money that goes into a deal that finishes the capital stack. It can be concessional finance, so it can just be cheaper. It can be an extended tenor. It can be back-ended amortization. In some instances, we can look at subordinated financing. It's as required to get the deal done. So to be eligible for blended finance, the IFC website, blended finance website, talks about two things. One is a market failure. The money can't be raised by traditional financing means. And it talks about pioneering projects in challenging markets. So pioneering and challenging, keep those words in mind as I go through a case study. But certainly within ADB's network, we have plenty of examples of that. This transaction is getting a little bit older. It was done nearly 2 years ago, but it's a good example of blended finance and co-financing all coming together to complete what is, again, a pioneering and challenging project. So the Monsoon Wind Farm in Laos, there's a lot of people in this room who know a lot about this project. It was a very large wind farm in Laos, largest onshore wind farm in Southeast Asia, first in Laos, 600 megawatts. But just to make the deal a little bit more different, it was the first cross-border. So the PPA was actually with the government of Vietnam, state utility EVN. So you had that cross-border aspect as well as setting up a greenfield project in a remote location. So that made it a poster child for blended finance eligibility. But more fundamentally than that, it was a big project and the debt requirement was approaching 700 million. So just to, if you see in the middle of the page there, the funding was provided by. So we drew money from all different sources. Obviously, ANZ backed it with its own balance sheet and its own commitments. We also looked at commercial banks to come into the deal. You see on the chart, SMBC was one of the international financiers. There was also regional banks who knew the territory well. So that was another 150. Co-financing partners, other development banks. So JICA actually came in on this one under a direct basis, not via LEAP. AIB was also involved. So we maximised that liquidity tranche. And then the last tranche was the blended finance. And you could say, well, 60 million is not much in an overall 700 million, nearly $700 million capital raise. But the blended finance was specifically structured to deal with a particular issue on this project, which was curtailment risk, which was permitted under the PPA. So it was the blended finance tranche was set up as an undrawn liquidity line in the circumstances of curtailment. If it was drawn, the amortization would be back-ended under that. So if drawn, back-ended amortization, longer tenor and concessional pricing. So it sat as a buffer, as a protection for the senior lenders. So even though it was only 60 million, the argument would be, I think compellingly, that if that tranche hadn't been put in place, then the overall $700 million financing package would have been much more challenging. Happy to stop there. Obviously, I think we've got questions later on. Equally, I've got 2 minutes left. Equally, please come up and say hi after the session if there's any more queries. Thank you very much.
Perfect. We'll have more time for questions, and thank you very much. Indeed, this is a very innovative instrument, and watch the space we are hoping to utilize LEAP for many more exciting projects. With that, we will complete the ADB section, and I would like to invite Mr. Peter Dupont, co-CEO of ACE Partners, to present to us today. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to scale down to about $0 to $10 million range and talk about scaling up, working with small and medium enterprises. So one of the projects that I've been working on, or networks, since about 2009 is called the Private Financing Advisory Network. So essentially, what PFAN does is it goes out to the forest, it finds trees with fruit, it selects the best fruit, it polishes it, and it puts it on a silver platter for investors. These are early stage small projects, typically 1 to 50 million. And so we, in 2009, actually at ASEF, we launched this as a network in Asia. They'd been active. It was set up by the UN FCCC. There's a subcommittee on technology acceleration that it was set up under. So today, fast forward 15 years since then, since 2009, it's a global network. We have 258 advisors. These advisors are paid by donor money to coach projects and help them access financing. So we work in clean energy, climate adaptation, and circular economy. The main theme is having a climate impact, whether it's mitigation, resilience, or adaptation. Since we started PFAN in 2006, I think we've coached about something like 1,200 projects, 1,100 projects. 270 of them have received financing for a total of 3.3 billion. So the average size arithmetically is something like 15 million, but the median size, most of the projects are about 1 to 5 million. And this, I just threw this in here. Actually, I think this is something that I worked with Tristan Knowles on, just looking at the different areas, the investment need for different sectors. And so obviously we've heard repeatedly throughout last year's forum and this year's forum that we need to increase the size and scale of the investment by 4, 6, 8-fold. And I'm really happy to see that PSOD, the colleagues who just presented, and also the whole group led by Suzanne Gabori is really scaling up PSOD's, Private Sector Operations Department, and really planning on accelerating that. And seeing your examples were really helpful, Alex and Phil number 1. I'll call you Phil number 1. Phil number 2 is next. I'm not going to go too much into this because I really want to focus on 3 or 4 projects and sort of go through the examples and sort of how they develop organically and then what type of, how they got financing. So we wrote a chapter for the Clean Technology Progress Report by UNEP, which is done, UNEP Copenhagen Center, and it's done every year. And so it's a chapter on financing climate mitigation and adaptation in urban environments. So there's a reference to that in this presentation. And we talk about all of the challenges that SMEs have. And then we talk about a bunch of different instruments at this level of sort of really 50,000 to 5 million, where most of the projects that we advise are working at. In this chapter, there's a link here, so it's all available on the website. We do case studies in a bunch of different sectors. And so that'll be of interest to some of you. And then, so I'll just have 4 examples. This is a company called Soulshare in Bangladesh. This is probably my favorite case study. So this guy there, Sebastian Groh, had this vision of taking solar rooftops and connecting the solar rooftops with software so that the rooftops together, tethered together, could act as a mini grid. So you don't have to do a centralized grid. There are other companies that do something like this. Okra is one that you may know of. They presented here at ASEF. So he got some initial grant funding for this, I think 6 years ago. And as of today, he's raised about $16 million to scale this up. Now, the interesting thing in the second paragraph, he's expanding to change this from solar rooftops into something that will blow your mind. It's a virtual power plant with rickshaws in Bangladesh. So how does that work? Okay, each battery, he hasn't done it yet, but he's raised money for it. Each battery, I think they have thousands of rickshaws, I don't remember the exact number, can be accessible when they're charging to the grid. And so I think they said in principle they can cover 30% of Bangladesh's load. So, the last couple of rounds have been interesting because I went back and looked at the documentation. 2020, he won an Ashton Award to develop the new technology, 12,500, and then he got a $1.1 million SAFE. It's basically a way in early stage projects where you have a problem creating a valuation for the project, you get a future equity. And so that equity, so fast forward to 2024, they just raised 2.2 million. 1.1 million of that was a SAFE converting to equity. So I'm not an expert in this, probably other people here know more about it than me, but it solves a real problem for project developers to keep them from getting too diluted in the early stages of raising capital. And I think the ADB Ventures people and the Frontier Facility people at ADB are very active in this area too. Some of the projects actually have been invested in. Some of the projects that PFAN done have been invested in by ADB Ventures as well. This is a company that basically solves the problem of you've heard of the agricultural cold chain. And Enrico, I like the way you talked about value chains and looking at the value chain as a way the place to invest and to identify the problem and finance solutions. So they've been able, this is a father and son who grow and sell fruit and vegetables. And so they've had this problem over many years that it's just really expensive to have a diesel genset to keep these things cool, or you get a lot of spoilage. So they set up a biomass gasifier, and they basically have been able to do the chilling and ripening rooms with 95% less fossil energy input. They were able to raise $970,000, and I think yes, this was a loan from an early stage fund called Nexus for Development. So it's called, I think they have Pioneer Fund. So they basically, I don't know if it's concessional, it's just low interest, early stage debt. This company was founded by this very charismatic woman in Bangladesh, mainly in Tanantari, which is a region in the southern part of Myanmar, where there's really limited or no grids. So she has put together this business. She raised an initial grant of about $100,000. I think she did a few hundred households. Right now, she's raised $400,000 of grant and debt. Her latest raise she's going for is 1.1 million to go from 4,000 to 50,000 households by 2025. I don't know if she'll be able to make that, but that's just an example of the way that we see this working. Often the initial grant gives proof of concept, and then you have some equity coming in, which can help to unleash some debt. And finally, a really interesting Korean company that went to Uzbekistan to do solar energy. I think, yeah, solar energy initially. And then they actually realized that there was this problem with agricultural waste. So they completely switched their business model. They raised $1.3 million to do a waste to energy project from licorice. And $1 million of that came from offshore debt from a Korean investor, and $300,000 was debt. So usually what we see is a small amount of equity releases a larger amount of debt, but in this case, the equity was 1.1 million. I'm not sure about the dilution because that's usually a problem, but the 1.1 million equity was accompanied by 300,000 debt.
Thank you so much. It's always inspiring to see some pictures with actual face attached to it. And when you see small, medium enterprises getting grants, it takes me personally to a completely new level. For the next and last panelist, I would like to invite Philip Napier-Moore from Mott MacDonald. And Philip will share some really interesting case studies with us. And after you're done, please stay on the stage because we'll have our Q&A. Thanks.
I've been warned it's hot up here, so give me a second. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I'm from Mott MacDonald. We're a technical advisory firm, so I'm our energy sector leader for Asia. So I've been in the region 16 years working on big renewables projects. I'm going to show some pictures. The projects are a bit large to see any faces, but they're interesting ones. So I think my role here today, coming from the technical side, is to talk about those crucial technical inputs to investor and lender decisions on financing renewables. And I've got 3 case studies to share here. I'm trying to look beyond those kind of plain vanilla onshore wind, solar projects to more the boundaries of what is possible, some of those pioneering or innovative projects. You may ask why I've got a picture of a battery here and not a solar farm. I'll come back to that. So briefly, Mott MacDonald is a large international technical advisory firm, and we're particularly active in the renewable space within Asia. So we have a role on projects pre-construction, helping either the project owner to establish feasibility and procure contractors, or on the other side, helping the lenders to review those projects. We've got a particular focus on those large and complex projects, so battery storage hybrids, renewable interconnectors, big floating solar, offshore wind. And the role of the technical advisor working with the investors and banks on this is to translate those technical risks into financial terms and put boundaries around the risks so that a project's bankability can be assessed. Actually, I noticed projects in 3 of the previous presentations we supported, so good to see them profiled. So just setting the scene a bit here, this is going to be one of those feedback sandwiches. We'll start with some good news, then go to the bad news, back to the good news. So, on the one hand, we've got these COP28 targets to triple renewables. Globally, we're at about 2.5 times based on current plans. China's there, its current plans get to that tripling. The rest of Asia Pacific, on the bad news side, is only set to grow by 73%. So instead of 200%, which would be the target, it's at 73% from 2022 levels. So there is a problem to solve here. We're well short of targets. And one of the gaps to address is indeed the financing alongside batteries. I think when we talk about financing of renewables, it's going to increasingly mean renewable hybrids. So it'll be with batteries, it might be with pump storage. We're currently involved in the engineering of EPC procurement of a couple of gigawatt scale schemes, including this one, including some of the Singapore interconnectors, which are aiming to achieve financing over the coming year. So this is a forerunner. The Philippines is in the middle of a renewable energy boom right now. This is a really distinctive project with Manila Electric signing a 20-year PPA. There's a firm offtake. So there's a firm offtake. 850 megawatts is what will be put into the grid on an AC basis. And you have this much DC power and this much energy storage to make that possible. Right? It's mid-merit. It's not aiming to be baseload. It's not aiming to be peaking. It's in the middle. So it's meeting that steady daytime demand and evening demand. So it's 3,000 hectares of land. It's currently seeking equity investment. And Meralco made an announcement when they signed the PSA in 2022 that the rate for this renewable energy supply offer is very competitive and lower than fossil power generation plants. And that's the theme we're seeing. You can now get solar plus storage up to a certain percentage of production, so say 50% of the time, that is still cheaper than fossil fuels. It's not just the generation, it's the generation plus storage. So this is a real sea change, I think. Clearly, there's technical risks that come with a project like this, especially with the unprecedented scale. Timelines, quality assurance, land, logistics, environmental and social impact. But I think the key point for me to emphasize here is that what makes this project possible is an offtake arrangement that values the energy storage, which we don't typically have anywhere in Asia right now. We have markets with ancillary services markets that value grid stabilization, but we don't have markets where you're valuing firming of renewables through the public market mechanism. So this is a bilateral offtake. It was actually originally bid competing with mid-merit coal, so it replaced a mid-merit coal plant. And so it's an unusual example of where we're seeing that. Okay, next project. This is actually one of the ones that came up on the screen earlier. It's a project Marubeni's invested in, so Shino-san mentioned it. With all these projects, we may be involved, but I'm going to stick to what's in the public domain, just to be clear on that. This is an example of a seawater floating solar project. It's 181 megawatts. At the time this was deployed, the biggest seawater floating solar was 500 kilowatts. So they scaled up quite a bit. They obviously took some risk in doing that. When we talk about a bankable project, it's got to be proven technology. But equally, some project has to take the first step, right? And this is an example of those. So this is actually a fairly sheltered inland bay. So it's not exposed to the main waves from the sea. That's partly why it's possible. It's made of those modular HDPE floats. You may have walked on them if you go on pontoons by the beach sometimes. The kind of challenges you face on a project like this that you don't see on a big ground-mounted solar are around changing water levels, wind, wave, tides, currents, and the fact that your ground conditions change during the life of the project. So you might get scour, you might get sedimentation, you might get channel formation. So, there's quite a lot of freshwater FPV out there, but there's not really much proof of the technology in this kind of environment. There's no specific design codes. So this all kind of raises problems for the financing process. Questions might be, do we know enough about the site conditions? Are we confident in the design life of the key components? But this was managed. Coming back to the financing side of it, the due diligence started very early, so 2 years before the project was actually financed. So there was very early involvement to make sure that the project was lining up for bankability. And there was a combination of conditions precedent and conditions subsequent addressed the unique risks of the project. And I think it was also successfully refinanced quite recently after 2 years of operation. And I think it's very relevant because we're seeing a steep uptake of floating solar now to gigawatt scale projects here in the Philippines, and also large projects in Indonesia and the wider region. However, we've also seen a number of hydropower-based FPV projects that have suffered significant technical problems. We can't take for granted that all these projects go smoothly. And I'm going to talk about a project that didn't go smoothly next. So this is offshore wind. So we're not seeing these in Southeast Asia yet, but they're coming. Taiwan is actually a leading market for offshore wind in Asia right now with international participation. We don't normally hear bad news stories. People don't like to talk about them. We're in the lucky position to be in a neutral position on this. We weren't involved. However, an equity investor did ask us to look at the project, so we can pass some of the rumor from the reality. And from what is in the public domain, we can be a bit more confident about what's real. So the story behind this project, it reached financial close in 2019, just under $3 billion. Big consortium of financiers. These offshore wind projects are big. Big syndicated deals, 20 different lenders, Taiwanese, international, export credit agencies. 4 years later, in October 2023, when the other Taiwanese wind farms that started at the same time were just finishing, this was getting refinanced, and the quote is substantial additional financing from the same parties, right? You can read into that. The project wasn't going smoothly, right? This project comprises 80 offshore turbines with monopile foundations. So these are big concrete tubes, essentially, that you ram into the seabed. They're nearly 2,000 tons in weight. They're 100 meters in length. There's difficult geotechnical conditions across many parts of Taiwan. And this project obviously didn't prepare properly for those conditions that it encountered, right? So you'd have seen, everything is in the public domain that I'm going to talk about here, so you can see in the press that there were 3 different pile runs, which is where they tried to drive the pile, and it goes through an area of soft soil and it escapes, so it goes too deep. So then you've got a very expensive piece of kit that took a long time to fabricate, stuck in the middle of the sea, and you have to go recover it and do it again. So that, you lose a lot of money, you lose a lot of time. Now, questions have been raised by observers here on whether the problem is resulting from the adequacy of the initial geotech investigations, the foundation selection, should it have been jackets for this kind of condition? This is more like a lattice structure. The installation procedure, the installation contractor experience, the owner capability, the level of design oversight. I'm not going to weigh in here on what the actual root cause was, but it's clear that there were shortcomings and that the investors and lenders are taking a different approach to future projects. So when we talk to them, they're clearly taking lessons learned from that. I think that's the positive thing here, right? Mistakes do happen, but if we learn from them, then we can use them to assure the robustness of the future energy transition. And I think it's important to point out here also that the previous 2 case studies I talked about there were focused on mitigations around structuring, around the offtake terms, around the loan agreement terms. Here, it comes back to the point, you need a fundamentally sound project, right? There's no amount of structuring you can do around technical risks that haven't been adequately understood. And these weren't understood well enough in this case. Okay, so I hope that there's some new information for the audience there and some tangible examples, and happy to take questions in the relevant session.
Thanks so much. I think it's very important to learn from our mistakes, and it's great to talk not only about successes, but also about some failures. And this is my favorite part, actually. That was one of my questions. Don't talk to us about the great things. Talk to us about things that that have gone wrong. So with that, we are complete. We've completed our presentations. I would like to invite all panelists to the stage for questions. Thank you. If someone has questions to Enrico, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer as well. Any questions from the public? Please come to the microphone.
Hi, good morning. My name is Riaz Sangani. I represent a company called Vidulanka, which is a renewable energy development. Thanks a lot for the presentation. There were a lot of insights we gathered. My question is, we talked about risk guarantee and guaranteeing the funding. So I know that that can bring down the final debt funding, but what is the cost of the guarantees? Because it should not offset the benefit you get from your final lending, what you get. Just want to curious to know how it works.
Okay, thank you very much. The example in Uzbekistan that we had was a guarantee with a counter guarantee from government. And because it had a counter guarantee from government, it benefited from ADB's sovereign pricing. So that starts at 50 basis points, so very low. In a risky jurisdiction, if you don't have that, then of course the cost of the guarantee would be higher. It would be, based on our credit of ADB's own loan, and then there would be other ways to price it. We would use market comparables. And if it's too expensive and there's a case to be made, we can explore using blended finance from our colleagues to bring down the price of that guarantee. So that's how we approach those. Thanks.
Yes, hello. My name is Ed Al-Rahal. I work on the USAID funded Bangladesh Energy Program. And thank you for sharing that story for SoulShare. SoulShare is a recipient of USAID grants, also contracts in Bangladesh. My question is on the financing side, to which extent is character-based financing used to finance renewable energy projects? And does it work? Thank you.
Who's your question to? Yeah, Peter?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, is character-based financing used to project finance renewable energy? For example, as opposed to equity or collateral-based financing.
Could you say that director-based? I didn't understand.
Character-based.
Oh, character-based. You mean not based on the character and
Yeah,
integrity of?
yeah.
Well, I don't think, I'm not in the best position to answer that because I'm an advisor, not a banker or an investor. But I will just add, I forgot to add on the SoulShare thing. The stories that I told were about people who were on journeys to develop solutions and then how they sort of the ladder going up to Series A. The SoulShare is a Series A+, the one I mentioned. And I forgot to mention that USAID is giving them a grant to develop the technology further. And also they got a bunch of funding, like $5 million from an EU fund to expand the technology, the virtual power plants for trishaws into different countries.
Perhaps should just add on that from a financing side. If you mean but character-based, like a strong founder or characters like that. So part of our due diligence is certainly to assess all of the different parts of a project, and management team and the whole organization behind that is certainly part of our due diligence. None of these mega projects will get financed just on the character of one person, but it needs a very strong operational implementation team, etc. So it's really a combination of all of the management skills that we need to see to make a project successful.
And just going back to what we see on the SME side is that the biggest problem with the pitch decks, because we meet companies and they come and they say, we want PFAN to help you raise finance. And we're already talking to investors. And then we look at their pitch deck and it's lame, to say the least, often, right? And it's a risk to go to investor too early. So the biggest problem we see in the pitch decks is they don't really sell themselves, the management team. And yeah, just to agree with you, especially with the smaller companies, it's really important that the investor has confidence in the management team and that the project developers sell the management team and they have the requisite experience and skills.
Thank you. If I may follow up, the reason why I asked the question is because a lot of cases, the financing institution requires a high percentage of collateral. In some cases, 80% of collateral to finance a renewable energy project. Which is really, if you have 80% collateral, and that stops a lot of the financing to move forward. That's why, I'm asking if character-based is something that can be used in a combination with the collateral requirement in order to relax, some of the requirement of some of the financing institution for financing a renewable energy project. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So in fact, on project finance-based financing, we don't necessarily take recourse to a single shareholder. We really finance the cash flows of a project by itself, and in that case, we'll take up 100% of our financing in collateral. And that's really important because banks do provide the largest share of the financing of a project. Often equity only takes up 25%, while as senior loans take 75% of that project cost. And so we need to make sure that equity should take the highest risk, and therefore lenders should always be first in having access to cash flow. And that's why we really need to take 100% of collateral. And that's how you structure these projects to ensure that banks do see certainty on getting their financing back.
Thank you. This is Arjun Kumar Gautam from Nepal. I am representing the SIDCL, Hydropower Investment and Development Company Limited. It is a government-owned company established by the government to finance in the renewable energy sector. And my question goes to the representative of EIB. Being largest multilateral bank, do you have any plan to collaborate with local banks and financial institutions for developing country of Asia for leveraging of the local financing resources and for bridging the financing gap? If yes, could you suggest the mode of collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I know our sovereign colleagues are very active in Nepal. We have financed several projects, amongst others hydro projects in Nepal. On the private sector side, we are less active. I would need to speak to my colleagues on the financial sector team, what their current project development is. I focus on project finance or direct investments, but we have a whole team in Luxembourg that also looks at financial investments. So I can get back to you on that.
If you have a question, just come up to the microphone. So it's first come, first served. Thank you.
Okay, who will get there first? Quick.
Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom. The colleague from on the extreme left showcased how Southeast Asia is not on track. Colleagues from ADB showcased some innovative, complex or complicated financial instruments. So I'm curious, what is ADB planning? Are you going to ramp up with an army of experts from the market in order to meet that? Or is that also a challenge for you to getting the skill sets and the people?
I think Enrico is best positioned to answer that. When in doubt, always put at the management.
Good morning.
You saved me.
Okay, I'll follow.
Okay, now, I mean, you're touching on, there's so much we can do at this point in time. From an institutional perspective, ADB is going to what we call a revamping, I will say, and an expansion of our private sector, of course, operation. We have I would say, a private sector development shift, which I'm an integral part. And the idea, yes, we want to do more. Of course, to do more, we need more resources, so it's not going to happen tomorrow. But it's part of our intention to expand the private sector operation. We target being able to deliver more, to be closer to clients, and to, of course, mobilize the partners like Juliette and the others to help us to meet these targets. So sorry, I've been a bit institutional in my response, but we understand there's more need, and I guess my intro speech was also about that. And we cannot do this alone. We have to bring along a lot of partners. But on our own, we can try to, of course, target even more the private sector contribution to these challenges.
Thank you so much for taking this.
Mr. Dugay of Green Energy, Philippines, Mindanao. My question is related to matching between technical and financial. There were presentations yesterday about wind power, and most of the potential areas have a wind speed of 7-8 meters per second. Whereas the first primary wind farm in the Philippines in Ilocos, the speed is more than 22 meters per second. So there is a greater degree of positive revenue stream and financing for higher speed of wind. But as presented yesterday, I think that was in another room, it's below 10 meters per second. I understand it might still be funded, but there might be some variation on the cost of money. Please clarify about that.
Yes, so I mean, maybe to share some examples from the wider region. I mean, Philippines is actually pretty windy, right? And there's projects in Thailand, for example, financed on the basis of a 6 meters per second average wind speed. So it's not that it's impossible, you just need the right financial offtake terms, right? So the right power purchase price, the right general measures around that. And in general, Philippines also has very high power prices. So it should be viable. Probably the bigger question is whether the grid can actually take that intermittent grid wind power, right? And especially without batteries. And then when you add in the battery cost, does it still stack up? That's more of a question.
Hi, I've lost my voice from the speed dating here. I'm Steve Lyon. I'm a co-chair for the Independent Power Producer Forum for the Philippines. And I was hoping to get some feedback on the ADB's position for carbon credits. I was hoping to hear something on that. And if you could give me any feedback or direction or your position on that, that would be great. Next door, yeah. Well, I saw it financing renewables and a lot of that's happening here, so. Okay, well, anyways, thank you.
I can quickly touch upon that. Our sovereign team works with a number of governments on developing the carbon credits and properly accounting for them. We are looking at utilizing those in some of our countries of operations already, and obviously this is the place to watch, and we are going to see more of those in the future. But yes, we already see some carbon credits utilized in the project structures and project cost calculations. 1 more minute to go, more, please.
Thank you. Pierre Horner from ESCAP, Secretariat in Bangkok. Just wanted to have a question on the sort of financial modeling that is being used for making sure that while decommissioning coal plants, you're also investing in renewable at the same time. There's been some voices that RE bundling can be a way forward. But since we are talking about here investing on RE, what will be the best strategy that ADB or other colleagues can look at it? Because it seems that it's been studied that you can commission even early young coal plants in, for example, Vietnam, Pakistan. There's a recent study has been come out in a couple of months ago. So I just want to know whether these techniques, this financial modeling, is actually something that can be worked out, while decommissioning at the same time investing on RE. Thanks.
I'm happy to take this unless someone else wants to take. I'm not the best expert of that, but yes, we do have projects. There are models that already account for that. They're all in testing stage. I do not think there was a single project closed converting coal to renewable or doing both in parallel. But I have seen the models and they are a work in progress. And if you're interested, I would be happy to put you in touch with the program managers who are dealing with exactly that.
So we also supported. Is that on now? Okay, sorry. Red is on. So we also supported the ADB actually with this energy transition mechanism project, including the modeling of how you would decommission coal and ramp up renewables in parallel to meet, right? I mean, ultimately, you're talking about much bigger scale renewables deployments than currently exist in the region, like of the scale that I was talking about just now, and firmed renewables, and taking into account the kind of just transition impacts on the workforce. So I think there's a lot of good thinking going into that. I think clearly we're not seeing the right kind of regulatory framework to support renewables at that scale within the same countries. And the other question, I mean, I heard a great analogy in another panel recently where he talked about chariot, right? You know, the chariot goes at the speed of the slowest horse, right? And so if you've got like permitting, power offtake, you know, financing, you know, bankable projects as horses, I'd probably argue that decommissioning of coal is another horse to really like get the level of renewables penetration that we would need, for example, to meet those COP28 targets in Southeast Asia. You would need to start making better progress on that. And so, yeah, it's clearly is a work in progress.
Yeah, to the gentleman, Pierre, vous parlez français? Oh, c'est un bon nom français. Okay, so talk to David Elzinga. Like, I don't know if you know him, he's here. David Elzinga, he's based in Indonesia. He's working on the Cirebon project, and you know, him or someone on his team would know about that. And Steve, I apologize on behalf of myself and the guy whose briefcase I carry, David Morgado. We're organizing this for the Secretariat. I apologize that the speed dating has damaged your voice. Please don't sue us.
With that, I would like to complete our panel and thank our panel participants as well as our speakers. Thank you very much.